I did a phantom voices study, and I asked people, what do you hear? And then I also asked, well, do you hear voices anyway? And a lot of the people said, yes, they hear voices.
Tom Butler with Lisa Butler as director of the Association of Transcommunication, A-Trans-C, since 2000, founded by Sarah Estep, 1982, as the American Association of Electronic Voice Phenomena. He has several books. They're all listed on Amazon. There's also a lot of information on his website, atransc.org, atransc.org. The other website Tom manages, ethericstudies.org. You could read his submission to the Robert Bigelow contest asking for proof of life after death. So explain your position and what you do with electronic voice phenomena and all the other research that goes around that.
Right now, we're in the process of slowly retiring the association that we inherited from Sarah Estep. But we were the director. Lisa and I were the directors of it. We assumed leadership in 2000. We basically focused more and more on research. At the same time, the community, the larger paranormalist community, started to drift over towards well, for instance, we got a lot of questions. Do you have a local chapter that we can attend? And the answer is always no. And the hauntings investigation or the ghost hunting clubs are really filling that need. And so we basically, our membership has wandered off to those clubs, I think, and some of them just got old and died. And so we're winding down the association, and I'm archiving. I put all the website material that amounted to anything into book form and made them as cheap as I could on Amazon. And the idea is that when Lisa and I are no longer able to really support any of this activity, those books would still be available, because eventually the website will go away, and we want the information to be available.
The research that you've done is phenomenal. The examples that I have found for the electronic voice phenomenon with your website gives you a specific, it isn't, you're not trying to imagine what they're saying. These are concrete words. It makes sense. And then you can back up your data.
Well, I think that's really important because, for instance, on Wikipedia, when they talk about EVP, they refer back to Jurgensen and some of his recordings. And for their time and place, they were really excellent. But for today, basically, listeners can't understand them, and it's very easily pushed off as it's just pareidolia. And so we were trying to be very careful to have examples that were clear.
You have the book, and this is Transcommunication White Paper with emphasis on electronic voice phenomena. This is available at academia, and this is something you have created, and the websites are noted, ethericstudies.org and atransc.org. This is a really wonderful resource for anybody who's interested in this and the work that has gone into trying to make this stuff legit. I wish there were more places that did that.
So do I. One of the things I look for all the time is I'm 80 now, and I could be of better health, and I keep looking around and saying, well, who's going to pick this up? And the answer so far is nobody out there that's really trying to do the organized studies of these phenomena.
That's the problem. It takes time, it takes money, and initiative, so there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, emphasis on initiative, because a lot of these, it's really easy to mount a online study. For instance, what I've done with the What Do You Hear studies with EVP, or What Do You See studies with Visual ITC. Those tell us a lot, and they really don't cost much to do. It's just a lot of work. You have to have good examples. One of the things that I did was, I'm kind of proud of I did a phantom voices study, which was basically I put up sound streams that white noise, modulated white noise. By that I mean I've kind of turned it on and off, and then I think I put some radio sweep garbage up there, And I ask people, what do you hear? And then I also ask, well, do you hear voices anyway? And a lot of the people says, yes, they hear voices. And the white noise, some people heard voices. The modulated white noise is kind of like, it sounded like somebody talking in the background. A lot of people heard voices and were specific about it. And then this disclosure that people actually do hear voices. There's a lot of people out there that hear voices on their daily living that has nothing to do with paranormal. When we talk about, for instance, a witness on a website that's listening to your work and everything, it's really fascinating, some of the material you will get that I'm frankly not qualified to analyze. So we trudge along, but we would really love to have a collaborative effort from the academia. Okay,
so which I find fascinating, a lot of people said they heard voices even though there was nothing there.
Yep, absolutely. I don't know, nothing there. There are no voices there. And then they report that they hear voices and everything. We had quite a few responses like that, which was just astounding to me.
Do you think possibly that doing something like that allows for people to have a heightened sense of awareness to something that is in their environment that is masked because they haven't tuned themselves to that presence? Does that, is that a fair question?
Yeah, it is. The anomalistic psychology, I can never pronounce that. They start out with the assumption that it's delusional. Witnesses are delusional. And so they do tests to say, okay, what are your inclinations? And what they're finding is people who are more inclined, and there's tests show up as being more inclined to attribute things to paranormal, also happen to be people who have had a lot of paranormal experiences. They write it off as being, well, it's that inclination makes it delusion. And then exceptional psychology people, exceptional experiences psychology people, they do similar studies, and they conclude from the same inclination that, well, people have had these experiences, and therefore, like you say, they're more heightened to them. And I think that's the case, really, is we attune ourselves to what we are interested in.
Well, if there's so much in terms of learning about to be clairsentient, clairvoyant, all the clairs, and those abilities are something that we already have. It's just that there aren't specific guidelines, universal guidelines on how to tune into that. And so we're all out here doing our own little thing of trying to figure out why this is happening, how it can possibly happen when other people around say this is impossible and you're making it up and you're just wanting it to happen. So that's, to me, that's a problem.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head right now. For today's new challenge, I during the Bigelow essay contest, I repeatedly reviewed these studies, these essays, and concluded that there is no consensus model that they're willing to buy into. Each one has their own little island of belief. You've got your out-of-body experiences, your reincarnation experiences. These are all different studies, and it's like they don't pay attention to each other. And then, of course, ITC, those essays, there's 20 some of them. When they mentioned ITC, it was very quickly dismissed, and often it was because Jurgensen's stuff is so, that you can't hear it. I'm writing an essay now. I've been writing it for 6 months. It's basically saying, okay, I keep talking about a consensus cosmology. This is what I'm talking about. And I'm kind of using the implicit cosmology I developed in the Etheric Studies website. I'm kind of using that as an example, but it's not something I'm married to. First of all, if researchers would say what they think, like, for instance, Dr. Moody, I've watched him evolve since he was a lecturer in Las Vegas. he wouldn't say anything about survival if his life depended on it. I mean, he wouldn't commit. Now he's pretty committed to saying that he thinks that survival is real. If the researchers would first start out by saying that, okay, this is my working hypothesis, then at least we'll know how to read their essays,
yes.
their research. And then, of course, you and I are left to our own devices. I am not an authority figure. Without a PhD, I really don't carry any verbal weight. So I'm not an authority figure. All I am is just really a reporter. If our people that we look up to as opinion setters in parapsychology would say, okay, this is our working hypothesis, and this is what our research is showing. They don't have to say this is truth. They just have to say that this is what we think now. And like in physics, the astronomical cosmology that has been, that virtually all the astronomers are using as a foundation, that's just a theory. We're not saying it's absolutely truth. The Big Bang isn't absolutely truth, but it's something that we're working with. But we need something like that for things paranormal.
Yeah, my frustration is even with the degree, PhD, whatever, there is often no behind that PhD experiential something that they have actually had boots on the ground, experience, knowledge of an event, whatever it is they're studying. It's like, okay, I've taken all of these research papers and I've observed people in a setting, and I've interviewed certain people who've had experiences. But for me, when you have the actual experience, everything changes. You have a different awareness, a different understanding, a different engagement. And sometimes what that does is also increases your ability to have more experiences. And that blows everybody out of the water when it comes to where we are with this content and this topic. For me, there are few who've had experiences, and they are overwhelmed in the numbers of people who haven't.
And this is where I get kind of on my soapbox. The academic community in parapsychology, it's basically PhD. I've been shunned by people who have a lot of experiences in ITC, but they have a PhD, and they wanted to kind of hang out with the PhDs and not with the rest of us. And that kind of, I talk about an academic layperson partition. The effect of that is that, like you say, the people who have the experiences are not the people who are in a position to study it. And the people who are in position to study it don't want anything to do with people who are lay people.
It's like cooties, the old school cooties.
So you have a separation between experience and ability, I guess, to study.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that, that everything evolves. And I'm hoping that as this other stuff starts to become more open in terms of beliefs about life after death, beliefs about the availability of all around us to tap into different, shall I say, dimensions, different awareness, because there are people who have experiences with a deceased person, a close relative coming to them. Well, then that continues as the family hears the story and children grow up knowing, oh, this is just normal, instead of, oh, that's weird, that's spooky, that's scary, don't talk about it, go away. That changes.
There's two things to look at. One of them is the Society for Rapport and SORAT, the Society for Rapport and something or other, telekinesis. That the whole idea, they would write letters to each other, and they'd talk to each other, and they basically developed a friendship amongst themselves that they felt brought energy to their studies. So basically, by having a rapport with somebody, they feel like they're able to better psychically communicate with that somebody. And we see that amongst family members. Like, for instance, the James Carpenter's first sight theory is to me, it's one of the most important theories out there right now. Basically, it says that one of the things we do is he has rules. He says that basically we're all psychic, and when we express telekinetically. We all do that. It's just a more or less. And this guy, that, by the way, has done a lot of research. He's a psychologist. He's worked with remote viewers and a lot of other studies. And I was able to basically take his corollaries and plug them right into my cosmology, and found it. Every time I turn around, there's more usefulness of it. But one of the important corollaries in it is what he refers to as switching. Basically, what it boils down to is that if you can't focus, then you're not going to have as much potential for clear thought or for psychic experience. And the better you can focus, that which you were focused on is going to become more part of your awareness. So it's really just a rule set for how we think, and it fits exactly what you're saying, is that if we're paying attention, if we have an interest, if we have experiences that help focus our attention, then we're going to have more.
They have training for that. That's what's so fantastic, because when you start learning about people who've either had maybe a UFO encounter or a mediumship kind of encounter, they mention learning through programs that focus just specifically on basically entrainment, going through whether you're reading cards and repeating that number of cards, what's on the card, the face, and going through and really kind of clearing your mind so that you're only thinking about those things. And as you do that, you're blocking everything else out. You're blocking all the social media, all the news, all the drama in your life to get focused and entrained on being receptive. And so it's really, for me, that's been fascinating to learn that the Jose Silva program and some others are dedicated to teaching that type of philosophy and those patterns to get people more psychically attuned. And they may have different words for it, but that's what it boils down to.
I took Silva back when they called it Silva Mind Control back in the 60s. Mm-hmm. And they're still around, but now just the Silva method, I think.
Yes.
But you're exactly right. The probably one of the more important things you just said was entrainment. If you sit with a physical medium and go through, like Kai Mugi, for instance, and if you pay attention to the way that the seance is conducted, he's basically entraining himself into a deeper and deeper trance, induced trance. And when he comes back, you can see him backing out of that entrainment to back into consciousness. Entrainment and I think personally, that's probably 9/10 of physical mediumship, any of the practices, is the ability to be able to go to that level of consciousness. And the way we do it is by developing a familiar mental path to it through entrainment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. When I was learning to channel, the guidance I had was to step out to the right, basically step aside to allow the entity, the being, the intelligence to speak through me. And there was 3 years of practicing weekly in different situations to be able to get that without getting any interference from the other little entities who are out floating around looking for an entertainment. And at the very beginning, you get some interesting characters, and they have agendas, and they love it. And so it's blocking that, because sometimes that information is just like chat 4B, whatever it is, giving totally wrong information, but sounding really interesting.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Like,
but
okay, go away. But that part of it is learning to separate from your own mind and your stuff, and then the other stuff that's just out there, and then from the intelligence that's trying to come through and present coherent and basically logical kind of information that will help you achieve a higher level of awareness. And when you get that, there's a huge difference between that and the other little jokers. So,
yeah, and I think that the key word there is practice, practice, practice. And most of us, like I've had a lot of training in mediumship and clairvoyance and stuff like that, but I'm a terrible practicer. So,
yeah.
So well, I know the techniques of it and the mechanics of it, theory, but and this is why parapsychologists so much need to learn how to work with practitioners like yourself, is that it's one thing to know the techniques of it and the theory, it's another thing to have developed the ability to work with that.
Where you can experience a difference physically is when you get in touch with an entity that's a player, a joker, a deviant, somebody, and I call it a somebody because to me it is, then if they give out negative energy, then it's the tailbone, which is the root chakra. The root chakra, I had a bruise from one that came in and basically read the riot act to my aunt who was helping facilitate this. And as a hypnotherapist, she helped talk me through. And I knew because of that residual, I'm not going down that track again, but some of it, you have to experience it to understand the dynamic and know this isn't a dog and pony show. This isn't a circus. This is not a game. This is real. And there are real after effects if you go down the wrong path.
The movie White Noise with Michael Keaton. Michael Keaton, they had three bad guys in spirit that were hanging around giving him orders and making people do things. Well, those conceptually represent just exactly what you're talking about. We're not necessarily talking so much about a boogeyman waiting in the corner. We're talking about alignment of our own psyche with our better interests.
Yeah.
And so I think that however you model that, I think that it's really important to recognize that it's a very real experience. We may not be able to define exactly what it means or how it's done and everything, but it's a very real experience. And by doing like what you've done, you working with the hypnotherapist is a pretty good idea, that you develop this, what would you say, the perspective on reality that allows you to be able to be more open to some of the things that people with a different perspective wouldn't.
The thing I can say is you develop a baseline, knowing a difference. There's discernment of what am I going to allow? Because if it comes through me, I do have a responsibility, and if that is an accountability. So if that's the way I want to go, well, then there will be an eventual determination of whether I should have taken that path. Nobody else makes that call. It's my deal. So knowing that, though, I think people, when they get into it at first, are entertained by a lot of this stuff, the table tipping, those kind. It's like there's a buzz when you're around this kind of energy, and it can be, as a lot of people who are doing the channeling, addictive. It's like, oh, what's next? What's going to happen next? And so a lot of this stuff that right now I believe is an electrical response from us, that's what the buzz is about, is something that we have yet to determine where it comes from, how it works, why it works, and how to define it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. We spend a few years with Ekankar. We like to immerse ourselves into these experiences, and we spent actually 3 years with Ekankar. And one of the things they teach a lot is, I think they use the word Darshwan. It's basically, it's the seeing of the living Ekmaster in spirit. They'll describe it as like a B-52 flying overhead or something. This buzzing, the sound, and they're really into the light sound of God. Well, that vibration, I think, well, it's very real. I've experienced it with the momentary out-of-body travel.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no idea how to characterize it otherwise or what it fits into. What you've described sounds good.
I remember reading what is In My Soul I'm Free, Paul Twitchell.
Yeah.
Years a long time ago. But yes, that was a way of getting into the mentality, the mindset of these things are possible. And Robert Monroe, with the out-of-body stuff. And my grandmother actually went there and took a course when he first started. She was so disappointed because she never was able to achieve an intentional OBE. And that's what she wanted, but she was in the environment for it.
Yeah, we've attended quite a few Monroe classes. We even met Monroe one time, and as a matter of fact, one of his daughters, spoke at one of our conferences, and then very shortly after that died of cancer.
Oh.
So that was a loss for us. But that's exactly true. That entrainment again, that's such a powerful tool.
Okay, I sent you because I wanted to get a professional, somebody who's dealt with this over and over and can kind of weed out things that are just things that are, a wannabe versus this sounds like it might be legit. I sent you some EVPs. Now,
right.
What were you able to determine and your prognosis on the quality of what I sent you?
Well, I think that I certainly heard a couple of them, and I'm really a bad witness because I shy away from single syllables or very short that my brain can't wrap a context around. One of them, I forget the exact utterance, but it was pretty clearly appropriate for the circumstance. And you have an ideal environment there for recording EVP in the sense that you've got multiple amplification stages, you've got analog to digital. We think that it occurs in the analog stages. You necessarily, if you go through a microphone, for instance, you go through an analog stage to get to the digital. Yeah, so you definitely, I feel like you did have some EVP there, and it makes sense.
I'll play a couple here later on, not while we're talking, but I'll add them so that there'll be an idea. One, I had all by myself, and so I know that there was no interference, because that's the other possibility. Sometimes when you're recording and in this situation somebody speaks on the other side, it'll come through and it'll kind of be cut out, and that could sound like an EVP, and it isn't. And yeah. I had the luxury of one of the people that I interviewed. He was also recording on his end, not able to get the quality of my voice, so it wasn't usable. But what I could hear when I went back and paralleled the audio was that he was trying to say something, and on my end it was like, whoa, and it was like, aha, yay. So I could rule that out. So that's one thing I've had to learn in doing this. I was totally, I've done this for years, and I did never have this set up. I had, thought, because I got the little microphone, little recording like you had, like Sarah's set up there, I thought, well, I'll try that. I gave up. Oh, it's too time consuming. And so then out of the blue, I get this, and it says, in the middle, it says nightlight. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't hear it when I was doing the show, but when I'm going back to try to get out all the extraneous sound noise, all of a sudden there was that little blurb that said a word, and it was relevant. And but I don't know who, I don't know where, how. I can't in that way define what the source is. I would like to, but I'm not going to. Tom's book, Transcommunication White Paper, with emphasis on electronic voice phenomena, EVP, is available in paperback or Kindle on Amazon. A quick break. Can you capture your own EVP? Continuing with Tom.
There's two different types of EVP that I run into. That one of them is you can clearly make out the person's voice, and you can pretty well tell who's talking. And then, of course, they say something that's appropriate for the circumstance. But there's other EVP that it's a little bit like putting your ear up against the wall in a hotel. You can hear talking, and you know there's somebody talking over there, but you have no idea. And there's a lot of it. It seems like what I would say is the peanut gallery. There's people that are watching. Like, for instance, you drop your camera on a ghost hunt, and you get an EVP that says they dropped their camera. Or one of my is we were asking just in general, do you have a message for the cameraman? This is when I was working with White Noise, and we got this pretty clear EVP. It says the cameraman, like that. Well, we have no idea who said that. It was a good EVP, but inappropriate. But so that there's just two different categories that I've kind of given up, unless it's somebody that you're communicating with, like Martha Copeland's Kathy, her daughter. She was a routine communicator. And that for grief management and everything, that's a really important way of going about it.
And which one is that?
Being able to, you're making contact with a loved one and then continuously communicating with the loved one.
Okay.
So we have a couple of the big circle mothers are still communicating with their kid on the other side. See,
that's what there's a huge, I think, interest in communicating with the deceased, whoever it is, and having had people come to me asking for a connection and saying, are they okay? With pets and people, it's nice when you get an affirmation, and sometimes they'll do things like there was a woman who came to me when I was doing an event, a local event, and she said, my son, he lets me know that he's there, and this is what he does with my necklace, and the necklace is completely solid. There's no break in the chain, and she had a medallion that was hanging on the necklace, and she was saying, well, what he does is he makes the medallion come off, and it came off as she's talking, and she's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what he does.
Wow.
So, little things like that are unexplainable, but they happen.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, by the way, on matter through matter is one of the things that puts in physical seances. It's the spiritualist approach to it is that they'll strap the medium into the chair and basically think that that's proof that he doesn't, he's not getting out and doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And we've watched matter through matter situations on a number of cases where they'll get out and then get back in again without any. We even watched Stuart Alexander. We watched a strap come off of his. Well, he pulled his hand through the straps, and then another strap came back in and tied him down again. That's that like the medallion you saw. That's kind of a real good indicator that we create our own reality.
To me, what happens is there is a time shift, an energy shift, and the atomic structure or subatomic particle level isn't the same as what we normally experience. So something is able to speed that up to make it so that there's nothing there, to make that disappear for a moment. So either they're to say they're operating on a higher frequency level. I don't know if I have the language for it, but there's something there that is not mirrored with our reality that puts, I think, a trans-dimensional element to it where they're operating at a higher level of reality than we are. And so we're here in the Dros going, oh, that's impossible. And at the same time, it's like, well, it just happened. So it isn't.
Yeah, right. Well, that was the question I set out to try to answer when I developed the implicit cosmology. Basically, I made in engineering, you have a technique called black box analysis. And you imagine a box that you know the signals going into it, and you know the signals coming out of it, and you try to develop what kind of functions would have to occur inside the box in order to be able to cause those outputs, respond to the inputs, cause the outputs. And when you get into subjects like matter through matter or remote viewing or psychokinesis and the response to random event generators. You basically, the only model that I've found that even approaches answering or illustrating those effects is that we create our physical reality by manipulating the concepts about the physical reality. So in EVP, it's not manipulating the recording, it's manipulating the concept of the noise that it transforms into the recording. So it's all more. For instance, we know that white noise is a lot less useful for EVP formation than random noisy, dirty noise.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going on is, we think, is that the white noise is more determinate as a concept, the concept of white noise, because each next sample is more fixed to be like the previous example. And then the dirty noise, you don't know what's going to happen next. So when we start impressing our intention on noise to cause the EVP, we're more easily able to manipulate the uncertainty than we are the certainty. So in effect, what we're doing is we're creating reality from the non-physical side, not from the physical side. So terms like energy and stuff like that, quantum especially, become misleading and possibly not appropriate because they entrain our thinking into the wrong point of view.
When I have to do channeling, I have to totally, completely let go and relax and be willing to suspend my, I would say, ego, my mind, my control. And at the same time, I still have control, but I am stepping aside. And that's very intentional, to be an open conduit, an open channel. And that, I think, is what's happening when people are intending to let an EVP come through. They aren't really controlling it. They're allowing. They're receptive. And I think that's part of where we get in trouble with, I'm going to make this happen. And it's like, no, you've just gotten in the way. You just stomped on it. So get your heavy foot off of it and allow it and create a bowl, create a bubble, create an, in some way, empty space to see what comes up next. And I think that's the difference with your white noise and then the other random noise.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good description. The biggest thing that I guess that I'm seeing is that like Lisa gets much better EVP than I do. I just occasionally get one. She's got a degree in psychology, and I've got a degree in engineering. What they'll say is, I think it's maybe Monroe was saying it. Carlos Castaneda, Don Juan was saying, "Don't make the world." And he was yelling at him because Carlos had come up on and running in the dark, moonlight, a bush waving around in the wind. It stopped him because he thought it was a dog dying in the ground or writhing on the ground. And he looked at it, and then he finally saw what it was. And Carlos raised hell with him because, or Don Juan did, raised hell with him because he took the life out of that bush by critical thinking.
Yeah.
And that was the what he was trying to break him from doing. Is the whole initiation was all about stopping the critical thinking, leaving room for the possibilities.
We have a tendency to project, and so it's like creating dragons out of mice if they're only shadows, and you're frightened. The fear monster rears its head, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, no, there's this big shadow, and it's just a tiny mouse. And that is an autopilot response that's survival, fight or flight. And so shutting that down to experience the ephemeral, experience the unknown, the mystical, the wondrous, it takes effort.
I would agree. And all of the ancient wisdom that I've read, the Hermetic teaching stuff, they talk about learning to be able to distinguish between, well, the seeker's way is really learning that you are not your body, but that's a Monroe teaching, and that you're, well, what it boils down to, the movie Avatar?
Yeah. Yes.
The guy would go into a box and through technology connect to this avatar, it's a clone, basically, that he'd go around and he would become that clone. Well,
yes.
In a way, what I refer to as the two-mind solution to the survival hypothesis is that, one, we have our body, physical body. It's an organism that has evolved in the physical, and then we have our spiritual self. And if you think of one as being a symbiotic relationship with the other, then these behaviors, like being afraid, our mind isn't afraid of the dark. Our body is.
Mm-hmm.
The human instincts are basically scared of everything. And our mind, in spirit, darkness is just a human experience, not a spiritual experience.
If you go camping or go hiking and learn how to navigate at night, within 20 minutes, your eyes adjust to the light. And so the first thing that people do when they grab a flashlight is create blindness.
That's true. That's true.
So with that, it's this way of learning to navigate the unseen and realize it's actually not empty. It's full. But you have to be able to be non-judgmental because it will not look like you. And it may not look like anything you've ever seen before. And you still have to accept, okay, this is actually normal. I just haven't had the ability to see it. And that is so hard to make that leap.
It is. And again, if you say, well, the mind, the body mind, living under the influence of instincts, survival instincts and everything, it would be actually counterproductive for it to make that leap. So you're really, when a person tries to become a seeker or clairvoyant or develop the mind, I would almost think scaring the body that we're going to abandon it. But if we think in terms of the two aspects of who we are and recognize that a lot of our behavior is not our behavior, it's our avatar's behavior, then things start to change. But it's really hard to let go of this business that I am my body.
There's another element that goes along with that. When you become engaged, like Carlos Castaneda, you have help on the other side. So you're not really alone, but you have to be able to engage to the help on the other side and not the help that says, be frightened, it's a bad, but say, okay, turn left. And listen to it and pay attention. And then you'll know when the turn left is legit versus the turn left and it's a sink pond or something. That's...
I think you're right.
But that's it. That's it. Because, there was one time I had a very strong, right beside me, language word, run. And it was out loud in my ear. Now, the girlfriend I was with, who was also supposed to run, didn't hear it. And she asked me, why did we run? I said, because didn't you hear it? They yelled, they run. And she didn't hear it. And but that was, multiple times these influences have shown me and have worked with me that these are other elements that are with us, but we are evolving to hear them. We're not there yet.
Yeah. One of our... it's always a mystery to me why I bother to write this stuff. One of the things I was at a Monroe session actually out at IONS, Noetic Institute's facility. They push you off to your bedrooms to listen to a EVP, listen to a hemisync.
Yeah.
And we'll basically go through a period of time waiting for them to turn on the hemisync. so we're listening to music, and it's got him and sync in it. So you're relaxing, and then all of a sudden I hear this voice. It's Barbara Thurman, who's a mentor of ours. She's on the other side now. Said, Spiritualism 101. And it was more, of a command than anything. And she's always been after me to write books on spiritualism, write about spiritualism and everything. So I've started writing more about the spiritualism, but mainly what I've found is that there's guidance like that. Usually it won't be shouted in my ear like that, but there's guidance like you're saying. We're not alone, and if we learn to pay attention, our friends on the other side can be very helpful while we retain personal responsibility.
They won't do it for you, but like Tesla, Einstein, people who have these incredible inspirations to develop something that's basically mind-shattering and human evolutionary, beyond all belief advancement, they get that kind of inspiration, but they have to manifest it. They can't, they don't just hand it to you and say, okay, here it is, go. They say, here's the idea. You take it forward. And then people are inspired and engaged and energized, and they go with it. Now, not everybody is, but I think that's what happens in the way that they are guiding us, is that here's the information, this is relevant, it's what you need, it's up to you to make it happen, and how you direct it, whether you're going to be Oppenheimer and come up with something that's like, oh, wow, that was a mistake. Because it was in the wrong hands? No, it's just that pulls us forward, and that we get the fallout one way or the other. But I think that's part of the spiritual guidance, is you have to understand, is this on your watch? And when you are writing stuff, it doesn't mean it's written for the people right beside you right now. It's written for those who come after and are looking for other ways to expand their horizons and become more aware of this other potential that's right beside us, but might not exist in their community.
Yeah. I'll admit, I tell myself that I'm writing for that one person who gets it, and I'm still looking.
Okay, stop looking. Just know. It's there. It's there. See, that's the deal. It's so frustrating. Because it's like we are conditioned to say, oh, here's a like, there's a like, there's a thumbs down. Oh, and then you stop for a while. That thumbs down, darn, that was like a kick. And then you go back, well, okay, fine, that's just one thumbs down. And it might be 20. But the thing that helps is to forget about the critic and forget about where it's going and know it's legit. It has to be written, and you are the way that it comes forward. And
that's the contents of the etheric studies is the so what part of what I've learned from A-Trans-A or from EVP and everything. So you're right. That's one just sometimes you don't question why you're compulsed to do something. You just do it.
I don't have the name of the author who just died. All the Pretty Horses, that was just out, the literary genius who was completely not into social things at all. They invited him to make a presentation. He said, I'm busy. And they said, well, what were you doing? Writing.
I remember seeing something in the news about All Pretty Horses. So, I know what you mean. Yeah, you have to admire people that, well, first of all, the fact that they're able to create intellectually, and yet they're able to communicate these ideas to those high-reach people. And
they shut out the noise. There's a lot of noise.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, it's called white noise.
One of the hardest things, I think, one of the organizing principles that I've put together for the implicit cosmology was that you have to. It's a limit of perception, and basically a worldview. If something isn't in our worldview, what Rupert Sheldrake referred to as nature's habit, if it isn't there, then it's almost impossible for us to comprehend it. What we do, though, is we evolve comprehension to the point where we can understand it. And people, you mentioned Tesla, for instance. the ability for a person to be able to make a leap of logic beyond what is in the worldview already that's where the true genius is.
Oh, you know what? I found the name before we start. Cormac McCarthy. That's the name. So
McCarthy, okay.
Yeah, so if you're listening, there you go. Google. There's so much information now, it can be overwhelming. So trying to develop any kind of language or universal thought on the stuff that we're experiencing right now, when you are writing and you're trying to get us to use certain terms, have you had any luck with that approach?
Well, it's interesting. I don't get any feedback. I mean, virtually no feedback. But what I'll do is I'll run into somebody be writing something, and I'll see one of my terms in there. Paul Twitchell used to talk about sweeping, where we're obliged to put it out there. We're not obliged to make you listen. And
yeah, teenagers.
And yeah, there you go. So yeah, that's I do see some, but one of the things is that, like, I've written Quora, the question and answer website.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I've put 2 books together from my answers on that, and I focused on mostly spiritual and parapsychology and stuff. And every once in a while, I'll get a thumbs up email notice, or somebody will share it, and something I wrote maybe 2 years ago will get shared. So one of the things I don't like about Facebook is that it's here today, gone tomorrow. But things like Quora, and I was able to put it into a couple books. Things like that seem to percolate into the community. They get corrupted, changed around, but that's part of the learning process for them and me. The reward is in the fact that in my own mind, I'm able to say, well, that makes sense if you look at it this way. And that's consistent with my, like the 2 main solution to the survival hypothesis. There's absolutely nothing new in that. The Kappa Upanishad, I don't pronounce that correctly, it's 4,000 years old. The Emerald Tablet is basically the instruction set for the creative process, and that's 6,000 years ago, we think. In the Kappa Upanishad, the god of death is speaking to the seeker, and he's saying, basically, think of yourself as being a charioteer, and the horses are the body, and the reins are your mind brain interface, and using different terms. But basically, that is a 4,000-year-old description of the two-mind solution to the survival hypothesis.
When you are writing a book, you are incorporating and bringing that information forward in language that's contemporary. So the 4,000-year-old, that stuff is sometimes very difficult to translate and even more difficult to understand.
Yeah, well, I mean, like the Emerald Tablets is just absolutely incomprehensible if you don't build some kind of a knowledge base around it first.
Yeah, so that I think is where we benefit from people who are doing the research and doing the exploring and the living and the integrating and the translating. And then it comes forward in contemporary language, and then it takes the next step and evolves from there. And that's what we have been doing the entire time, evolving.
Yeah, that's true. And that's one of those areas where I have to accept that the evolution's going to go in a different direction than what I may be visualizing. So I can birth the idea, but I have to let the child go, let them grow up on their own.
Somebody told me something recently about a little child who was so brilliant and so smart, and it's like, gosh, how do they know so much at such a young age? I said, because they're older. technically, this is the reincarnation. So they've been around the block a time or two more than we have, and they're coming back with what they've learned and putting it out for the rest of us to be impressed. And when we do our thing, hopefully we'll have something to add too. But I thought it was so funny. Why they're so smart, and how do they do that so young? Well, the reincarnation thing is that kind of says they are older, and we might treat them a little nicer if we knew that.
Yeah, well, that's true, and that's different than things like IQ and education.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of being older is more of a discerning intellect that it is more a comprehension, a way of experiencing things that IQ is just I don't know. We have a hard time modeling who we are because like temperament is way different than experience, and instincts are way different than discerning intellect, but all of these things are forces that mold us.
It's a selection process, and so there's a linear thing of white noise. If you do this, then you go there. If you do that, then you go there. It's like the little kid who came through and he swears that he is the reincarnation of a certain designer, and he is making dresses. I think he's 8. I don't know if it's People Magazine.
I just saw that.
Yeah, I'm thinking, okay, there's an example. He knows what he's doing. He's been around the block a time or two. He knows how this works. Just get away from me. I don't need anything else. I want to do this. I'm making dresses. Go away. This is what I do, and I do it well. So, you're not going to teach me anything about this because I know more than you.
Well, and how do we comprehend that they know more?
I know. It's like, no, we just feel very intimidated. Oh my gosh, why didn't I study more? What did I do in my last life? I must have just been fishing on the dock, and that was it.
Yeah, and I, at my age now, I am looking back, and I keep seeing people who were like America's Got Talent. Some of the contestants that are just kids.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's not. I don't think there's a person on some of these singing. We like to watch the singing competitions, and some of those kids are so mature, but they're just childs.
Yeah, it's not fair.
I was having a hard enough time figuring out what to collect today or something when I was that age.
Yeah, how to coordinate your wardrobe. Yeah, okay, there you go. And, to make the best impression in class, or which books that you should read as opposed to the ones you want to read.
Yeah.
Tom, I appreciate your time. And I know whatever information that you are working on now is an improvement because of where you've come from, the amount of research you've put into this. And there is no one else that I'm aware of who does the in-depth research with electronic voice phenomena and the other kinds of programs that you have researched and studied. So, and with Sarah Estep starting this out and you picking it up, I'm hoping you'll find somebody else to take the next level with this.
Well, I'm finding ways of being able to archive it. I think that there's a point where the association itself is being superseded by, there's other ideas out there, and there's better ways of doing things. And I suppose we could have kept pushing on it, but frankly, Lisa and I are kind of run out of energy. Things evolved beyond what we were able to put up with. So it's time for the next generation. Well,
I think it's here. So one way or the other, keep putting your work out and allowing people to learn from the archives. And the EVP collection that you have, I think, is a really good database for people wondering, well, what does it sound like and how do I know if it's legit? Because some of the language, little excerpts that you have, there's no doubt that what's being interpreted is that's what's said.
Yeah, and I guess what I encourage personally is that rather than getting somebody to do EVP for you, which a lot of people think, well, I'm going to go find a medium. When you do EVP for yourself, there's an excellent chance that you will be able to record a paranormal voice. It may not be the loved one you're trying to get a hold of, but you should have some kind of assurance that you are communicating beyond the veil, and that should encourage you to trust that they're okay and you're going to be okay too after transition.
I guess I should ask, so what is the best method that you suggest for capturing EVP?
An inexpensive audio recorder seems to work better than an expensive one, and noise that has periodic bursts of disturbing, like spikes of noise mixed into it, seems to be more effective. For instance, the reason that the Panasonic DR60 was so effective is because it was such a terrible recorder, but it had a lot of internal noise. Every once in a while, it would just start crackling and popping on its own. Well, we found that they used to, our members would refer to it as the angry man being coming across in the recorder. Well, it turns out that what it is some of those angry bursts are really "I love you" and "I miss you" and just really nice EVP. It's just that the noise helped form the utterance, like I talked about being indeterminate noise. So a fan, just a recorder and a fan, and listening back, it takes us maybe a half hour to listen to 3 or 4 minutes of EVP, or of recording, looking for EVP, and then experience, learning how to amplify a little bit, not a lot, noise reduction a little bit, not a lot. Don't cut time out. See if it's not very good, throw it away, do it again. The most important thing of all is to get a witness panel. Get some friends together that will give you an honest response. You know, if they think that you want it real bad to be an EVP, and you say, well, it's an EVP, then you're just lying to them and you. Give them an honest response, and they'll get better, because the entities can get better.
That's the thing, too, is as you continue to work with whatever entity you're with, they align with you.
Yeah.
That energy forms a bond. And it's just like a friendship any other way. The more you know, the better the friendship. It evolves, and that's what happens when you're working, like with my channeling. It evolved. I went through all of the little characters and bozos. While the others were teaching me to let me know, to throw me in the deep end and say, okay, do this. And so I had guidance, helping, in addition to the hypnotherapist, helping on the other side, saying, you're going to have to get ready for this, because this is, these are part of the scenery. And do you want to spend all your time with them? No, thank you. It was, yeah. So first date.
It's a very, very complex, reality is very complex. We have to do the work to learn how to work with it.
I appreciate your time, and I'll put the links for your information and the books in the description for the show. Anything you want to add before we sign off?
No, that's it. I appreciate your taking time with me. I enjoy it.
Transcommunication White Paper with emphasis on electronic voice phenomena, EVP, is available as a Kindle or a paperback. It's also available as a free PDF, downloadable at atransc.org. This is the EVP, one of them that I sent to Tom. A specific word, amplified. Again. Listen to the EVP samples on Tom's website. There's so much more to this, and the research continues. Thanks for listening.